Good afternoon. Today's August 13th. I would like to call the Salina City Commission meeting to order. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Mayor Jennings.
Here.
Commissioner Angel.
Here.
Commissioner Crawford.
Here.
Commissioner Householter.
Here.
Commissioner Shirley.
Here.
Would all those that are able please stand and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance in a moment of silence.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This is the time of the meeting where we have a citizens forum for any Salina citizen that would like to come forward and make any comments to the City Commission. We do ask that those be for things that are not part of today's agenda. So if you have an issue to bring forward, please come forward, state your name and your address. Seeing none, we have no awards and proclamations today, so we move into public hearings and items scheduled for a certain time.
Item 5.1, public hearing on the proposed 2013 budget. Sub-item 5.1A, first reading ordinance number 12, 10,651, adopting the 2013 budget.
Mr. Franz.
Commissioners, thank you. According to state statute, a public hearing is required to be held on the proposed budget within 10 clear days of publication of a notice. We did publish the notice in a timely way, establishing 4 o'clock on today as the hearing date and time. The final proposed budget includes total expenditures, excluding interfund transactions and reserves, totaling $72,513,030. Comparable amount last year was $72,042,452. Property tax levy is proposed at 26.272 mils, the same as the tax levy was last year. Have a number of challenges this year again. We are in somewhat of a recovery mode from the recession. Sales tax is showing some signs of growth. However, the property tax, property valuation is still pretty stagnant. It's essentially the same. Other financial challenges include losses on interest income, which amount to about $500,000 a year. Losses due to the business machinery and equipment exemption. This year that amounts to about $550,000 for the 1-year impact. So those two items together are worth about $1 million. Losses compared to the way to what they used to provide. Over the last several years, one of our strategies for minimizing service impacts of the recession was a major drawdown of fund reserves, particularly in the general fund. We come to a time now that as the economy gradually improves, we need to work at restoring those balances, and that needs to getting that to an appropriate level should remain a priority. Strategies recommended for the coming year, obviously review and reduction where appropriate of all budget line item requests. There's no general adjustment or cost of living increase contemplated for the pay plan. We do have an average allowance of about 2% to provide for some merit recognition. Staffing's been reduced from 511 full-time positions in 2009 to 465 full-time positions and that should say 2013. We are continuing the practice of adjusting fees and charges on an annual basis. As I said before, property tax rate will remain the same. And we're continuing to rely on tax stabilization transfers from the special sales tax fund. We have approximately 5 years left in that fund's authorization. So over the next couple of years, we'll need to be trying to address that issue also. Today, the City Commission should open the public hearing to take comments regarding the proposed 2013 budget. The budget is published, contemplates a total mill levy is 26.272 mills. Total taxes levied will change from $10,570,419 to $10,577,046, or a change of about $7,000. City Commission may select a levy amount up to but not exceeding the published number of $10,570,419, and I have incorporated a table there showing the impacts of past couple of years mill levy on, $100,000 property to give kind of an idea about what we're talking about. We will be increasing user fees. Sanitation is the major fee that we are increasing as a part of this action, and that will increase about 1%. Some other general fees will also be increased, and then consideration of a number of fees will be deferred until later in the year when we know a little bit more about performance this year. I would stand for questions, I guess, and then would ask that you open the hearing, take comments, and then continue the hearing until next week, at which time we will do the second reading on the ordinance.
Are there any questions of staff at this time? Thank you, Mr. Franz. Do you have any public comment at this time? We'll leave the hearing open, return the issue back to the commission for a motion.
I move we approve on first reading ordinance number 12-10-651, adopting the 2013 budget.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 12-10-651, adopting the 2013 budget. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. We now move on to the consent agenda.
Item 6.1, approve the minutes of August 6, 2012. Item 6.2, resolution number 126925, authorizing a third addendum to a grant agreement with OCCK Incorporated. Item 6.3, authorize the maintenance of water well number 11, project number 122935, to Lane Christensen Company in the amount not to exceed $45,402.05. Item 6.4, award a contract for the 2012 levee hike and bike trail improvements, project number 122928, to TNR Dirt Construction in the amount of $35,556.
Are there any items that the commissioner has a question on or would like to pull from the consent agenda? If Mr. Stack is here, I have a question on 6.4. Item 6.4 is the levee hike and bike trail improvements, and I know this is a multi-year project. It appears to be that we have received some favorable pricing on that, and I know in past issues like the mill and overlay, where it's an ongoing, sometimes we've identified further work that we might like to do within that area. Is that something that the department is going to consider on this project?
Yeah, our recommendation, the bid was $22,000 for the part that we thought was going to be more challenging, but it ended up not costing us any more than really the past projects had cost the last few years. And so what our proposal was to extend that on along Gypsum Street up to Iron, to basically to complete the loop that we didn't initially think we could do with the amount of topography issues we had in there, but favorable bids got us. We believe we can get pretty close to finishing that length. So that was actually our proposal, was to utilize the unit prices and increase the $22,000 bid, take it further for the $35,000 that we've got in here. So does that answer the question, or was there more to it than that? Okay, very good.
Yeah, absolutely does. I think this has been a great project for Salina, and I just wanted to call the attention that this was going to allow you to really get towards the finalization of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments or questions on any of the consent items? Nope. And entertain a motion?
I move we approve the consent agenda as is.
Second?
Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Today we have no development business, so we'll move on to administration.
Item 8.1, second reading ordinance number 12, 10,649, amending Chapter 1 of the Salina Code by adding sections 1.5.1 and 1.5.2 pertaining to the consideration and publication of ordinances.
This ordinance number 12-10649 was passed on first reading on August the 6th, and since that time there have been no comments received. Are there any public comments at this point in time? Seeing none, I bring it to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move we adopt on second reading ordinance number 12-10649.
Second.
A motion and a second to approve on second reading ordinance number 12-10649. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Commissioner Angel?
Aye.
Commissioner Crawford?
Aye.
Commissioner Householter?
Aye.
Commissioner Shirley?
Aye.
Mayor Jennings.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Item 8.2, first reading ordinance number 12-10,650, levying special assessments against certain lots and pieces of property to pay the cost of abatement of nuisances.
Mr. Franz?
This is a process that we do semi-annually now, and simply assesses the cost for abatements of cleaning properties around the community.
Any questions of staff?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory.
It's pretty clear,
It's
yeah.
pretty well there. Thank you. Any public comment on this matter? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
I move we approve ordinance number 12-10650 on first reading.
Second?
We have a motion and a second to approve ordinance number 12-10650 on first reading. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Item 8.3, award of contract for the South 9th Street Art Structural Foundation, project number 122927.
Mr. Stack?
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. Let's see, this is a big one, so I'm starting with the CAD policy, just to kind of reiterate. In July of 17th of 2000, the City of Salina Commission adopted a resolution establishing a community art and design program for the city. The CAD allocation shall represent an amount up to 5% of the cost of construction for selected city CIP projects, with a minimum of $10,000 per art project. So I guess I just wanted to bring that to everybody's attention. That was adopted by the commission years ago, and this is my first, since I've been here, this is my fourth year. Actually, I'm working my fifth year. It's my first art project that we've worked on. This is for South 9th Street that's been going on for quite a while. So I guess I know there's concern that economic times are tough, and it's how much art we should have on projects, but it doesn't happen very often, and it's we feel like this is a good project for this piece of art, and has been thought out and engineered, and we're going to talk about a very large foundation today to make sure it doesn't go anywhere in the near future. So I'll start with that. Let's see. Let's see, Phase 4 of South 9th Street reconstructed the roadway from basically south of Belmont to around Riffle Drive. We've completed the project thus far. It was split into many phases, four of them that we listed out here. The hardscaping, which was the median work, of course, the street project. Landscaping, which is close to being completed, however, it's going to be finally completed once this project, once the art project is completed. It'll be accented with some more landscaping as well. And then the art piece that we're going to talk about today. In April 2010, the City Commission did approve a sculpture and a contract, or a sculpture with Barbara Gargudis titled Silver Lining. And then March of 2011, they approved the contract with the artist for an expenditure of $246,000 approximately for the art, which covers a lot of her time, the design, the actual structure that we're purchasing. And then there was an estimate at that time of $20,000 for the foundation, the lighting, and the mounting, and other related construction expenses. Definitely was an initial estimate. It was very preliminary, and it was low for sure. The project includes the installation of 160 tons of reinforced concrete. So that's a very large structure. It's going to be 8 foot wide by 5 foot deep and 65 feet long. So it's a monster foundation going into the ground right in the middle of the median out on South 9th Street. It has a lot of reinforcing steel in there. And it is going to have anchor bolts and grounding rods and an electrical system for the lighting. So it's a pretty elaborate structure for this piece of art. Let's see, the contract with the artist stipulated that we're going to try to get this done by April of this year, so we are late. But circumstances kind of beyond the artist's control delayed the installation. The original geotech report was for the roadway out there, and it just wasn't quite specific enough for where she needed this structure to go. So once we got a more site-specific geotechnical report, it had addressed some concerns with the foundations and any history and slime. We don't want to worry about, this thing needs to stand up for a long time, so we definitely wanted to make sure. So we had some delays with getting some more geotech tests and soil recommendations, and then that in turn caused the design to be redone a little bit for those soil conditions. Significant lighting and electrical grounding is required, and so an electrical engineer had to get that done as well. So that's just one other thing that caused a little bit of a delay near the end of the project. And then the artist definitely isn't working on just this project, so trying to work it in her schedule. Fall of 2012 and around the end of October is when it worked out the best for her. So we're on track to get that done at this time. We definitely had a structural foundation designer, Wilson and Company, help us with electrical design. Hawkins and Associates out of Baldwin, Missouri, did the foundation structure. And we did get 5 bidders. Actually 6 bidders, which there's quite a range of bids, so it was a concern to us looking at all the bids. It's quite a different range, but in talking with a few of the contractors, some of them are pretty busy, so that could have factored into their bids, but there is a little bit of a range there, but at least the top 2 were not too far away. However, they definitely all exceeded the engineer's estimate, so and the original budget. So we just tried to figure out, okay, what's different here. And our estimates, we feel like we do a decent job on road projects, sidewalks, streets, storm sewers. We didn't have a lot of history on this. We did talk with the Hawkins and Associates out of Baldwin, Missouri, and he thought we're in the right ballpark with our $47,000 estimate, but it was still a little low compared to the 58. I guess it's maybe a little more challenging place to work. They're going to have to work inside traffic. They do have to haul dirt out and bring it back. So there were just some of the things that add to maybe why some of these bid items were higher than we're used to seeing. So we decided we'd talk to the contractor to see, okay, what could we possibly reduce here? Because we are on a budget, and there are sometimes things that the city can do that can help that aren't terribly costly to us, but are more costly to the contractor. And traffic control's been one that's been that we did on the last project with Smoky Hill, where they have to hire a traffic control sub a lot of times from out of town, and our guys are here, so we felt like that was one we could underrun that would save us some money, as well as landscaping and seeding, which we're planning on landscaping it anyway. We're not sure if we'll be able to when this project is done. We may have to wait till the spring to landscape, but either way, the landscaping and seeding, or the grading and seeding portion, is something that we can handle later at a different time, so we took that out as well. And so we felt like that if we could reduce it by the $5,900, it gets us down into the $53,000 range, and that was a doable number for trying to get it close to what we thought it should cost. Funding for this project, $6.5 million of bonds were sold to finance it, and thus far we're at, this will bring it up to around almost 6.2 million, which gets us close to the total, the 5% that's normally that can't, up to 5% that can be allocated for an art project, puts us right about that 5%. So at this point, I can answer questions about any concerns you have. I guess our recommendation is that we'd like to go with the $52,000 number with a 5% contingency. And basically, we have to build the foundation to set this art on, and that's the way it is. We just have to get it done. But I understand that it is higher than we initially hoped, and we need to do better about that. We all looked at these estimates initially. The artist had a number and looked reasonable, but we were off. So I apologize for that, and hopefully get better at this. So I'll entertain questions.
At this point in time, I actually would like to make a motion that we move into executive session for attorney-client privileges for a period of nearly 5 minutes to discuss with legal counsel matters subject to the attorney-client privilege. For reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matter. Reconvene at, that looks like 4:28 p.m.
Second.
Motion and a second to move into executive session. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? We are now in executive session. Turn from executive session, reconvene our normal session. At this point in time, are there questions of staff on this project?
Yeah, Dan, I just was going to ask, this installing lights, lighting conduit, and running wires, is that external? My understanding is I've never seen the full plan of the artwork. I understand, whoops, it was to be lit from the inside or something like that. Is this lighting that is separate away from that? That's. I mean, my thought being is if this $246,000 lighted tree, is to make sure that, I would think those lights would be part of that cost and not part of our cost. Now, I can understand the conduit and some of that stuff, I just want to make sure that we weren't lighting this whole thing. But I never saw the original bid. I mean, this was before my time, so.
Right. It's a good point to answer your question. The artist is installing the actual lights. They are providing the lights.
Okay.
So those are being shipped to us.
Okay.
For our contractor to install.
Okay,
basically.
okay.
So that is a good clarification that I don't think I
Yeah,
mentioned.
and that was my concern, so, okay, that's it.
And there's 24 lights, and there is a significant grounding system around this structure as well. So it's a lot more than we expected.
And then you would, in here it mentions the standard liquidated damages and things have affected the art contractor, but, or the artist, but we also have contractors that we're moving forward on, so that's just a standard part in case there's delays there.
Right, on our contractor for Votes Parga, they're under the $100 a day.
Gotcha, okay.
Right.
Okay, any other questions?
I don't have any questions, but I commented, and I'm going to comment again, that this was done by a different city commission. It wasn't done by the 5 of us that are here now. It was, 2010 originally, and then March of 2011, a month before 3 new commissioners got elected in. So, I just want the public to be aware of that it was a different commission that did approve all this originally. Because this is a huge project. That's my only comment.
Any other comments or questions of staff?
Well, I want to say that I think that probably the community will enjoy this a great deal, and I'm not opposed to art, but this is very much too expensive, and I'm not happy with the cost.
Any further comments?
No, I mean, I would just echo that it is an expensive project, and I too support public art, and just so the public knows, more than likely, we're going to vote this thing through this foundation, but we've already bought the art, so if we don't vote this foundation through, it's going to be stored in the warehouse or melted down or whatever else. So, yeah, just because we approve this, the public may get the misconception that we have an opportunity to back out or something, and we really kind of don't at this point, so.
I think those things are worth mentioning. A lot of the public that's followed this were involved even before the artist selection, and then during the approval of the art, had an opportunity to come and speak out for or against. So this is always good to review when a project takes so long. If there's no further questions of staff, I'd open it up for any comments from citizens who would like to speak on this. Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for action.
Mayor, I move at this time we award the contract for South 9th Street Art Structural Foundation City Project number 12-29272. Is it Vox Harda Construction LLC Newton, in the amount of $58,952.05. Is that correct? Is that the current number? Or did we modify that with our city traffic control option? Is that?
You're reading option 2, is that right? Option 2.
Is that?
Option 1, I'm sorry, option 1, 53,052, is that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, and that number's correct then?
Yep, that's the
Okay.
correct number, right.
All right.
Second.
Would the clerk please read back the motion?
It was option 1 or 2.
We recommended option 1, but I just don't remember what was your recommendation?
Yeah, I guess my question on that was, I was just making sure my $58,952.05 was the number. We didn't need to modify it, removing that traffic control cost. Weren't we going to offset some of that somehow by using city staff?
Yeah, so really then the award would be, option 1 award would be only for 53,000, that's already removing.
Okay,
So
gotcha. I'm sorry, I've seen the number here. Okay.
53,000.
So basically, award the contract for South 9th Street Art Structural Foundation City Project number 12-2927 to Vox Harda Construction in the amount, I guess then, of $53,052.05.
No contingency?
With
Do we have that 5%
We
contingency?
do usually have that.
Okay, yeah.
Plus the 5, yeah.
Yeah, plus a 5% contingency.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to award the contract with South 9th Street Art Structural Foundation for project number 12-2927 to Volks Party Construction in the amount of $53,052.05 plus a 5% contingency in the amount of
$5,900?
$2,652.60.
Oh, we just bid.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1.
Item 8.4, first reading ordinance number 10,652, amending Chapter 5 regarding alcoholic beverages pertaining to the issuance of a special event alcoholic liquor retailer's permit, clarifying the title and application of the cereal malt beverage retailer's permit, and the sale of cereal malt beverages on licensed premises.
Mr. Schrage.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As you may recall, in September of last year, you took action to amend the city code to provide for a special event retailer's permit for cereal malt beverages. And that was in response to statutory changes that have been enacted in the 2010 and 2011 legislative sessions. Those changes allowed for both special event permits for cereal malt beverages and alcoholic liquor. And at the time, the only action that was taken on our part was pertaining to cereal malt beverages. In fact, at that point, we identified that as kind of a test approach in terms of special events and site planning and regulating special events with the intention that we would come back and look at alcoholic liquor at a later time. And here we are today. As a little bit of additional background, there is a charter ordinance on the books that we adopted in the 1970s that correlated to the Bicentennial Center. At the time, the state statutes provided that cities of a population over 200,000 could exempt certain properties, the title of which was vested in the city, from some of the alcoholic liquor regulations. And so we took the opportunity at that point to pass a charter ordinance to give ourselves the ability, since our population was less than 200,000, to allow alcoholic liquor sales at the Bicentennial Center. Since then, the statutes have been amended such that they're uniformly applicable to all cities and not eligible for charter ordinances any longer. And so at this point, we are amending our local codes in response to the special event alcoholic liquor provisions. I won't go into all the details of the specific provisions of the ordinance and the conditions, but what I would tell you is that the ordinance before you reflects the conditions imposed on the statutory level, and the highlights that I would call to your attention are that the special event permit must be approved and permitted by the city manager, that no person may remove alcoholic liquor from inside the boundaries of a special event. The boundaries of that special event must be clearly marked by signs and a posted map or other means. No person shall possess or consume alcoholic liquor inside the premises that was not purchased inside the event. Each application must state its purpose for which the proceeds of the event will be used, and then additionally, they are required to use those proceeds as stated. Drinking establishments that are immediately adjacent to the special event have the opportunity to basically opt in and participate in the sale of alcoholic liquor in the event. If they do so, they also then take on the exposure for any violations that may occur. Special event permits are limited to 3 days, excluding Sundays, and an applicant is limited to 4 event permits in a calendar year. As I mentioned, the proceeds must be used for the stated purpose. The event permit itself is not transferable or assignable to another party, and the city manager, in addition to having the authority to impose additional conditions, may refuse to issue an event permit if there are violations of any provision of the Kansas Liquor Control Act. Then another opportunity that's presented by this legislation is that we have the ability to identify properties in which the city has title that alcoholic liquor sales and consumption will be permitted. So the ordinance specifically identifies Jerry Ivy Park, Bill Burke Park, and the East Crawford Recreation Area at this point. Hopedale, noticeably, is not on the list because we do not have full title to the property yet. Other parks are not listed primarily on the basis that those 3 parks represent probably the most likely opportunity for a community special event, but this would be an area where that can easily be amended to reflect other city property or parks. As it relates to cereal malt beverages, I would point out that one of the amendments was to rename the cereal malt beverage permit. It was just generically titled the special event permit. Now that we have alcoholic liquor and cereal malt beverage, we're going to have a special event retailer permit in both categories. It also clarifies that consumption of cereal malt beverage in one of those special event scenarios is permitted on public streets. And then it clears up a provision of our codes and mirrors state statutes that allow that alcoholic liquor and cereal malt beverage can be consumed on a licensed premises if properly licensed. And that applies to your more standard restaurant retailers. There is a provision which is picked up in our ordinance that's been on the state statutes for quite some time that clears up that prohibition. As our codes are currently written, it's a little confusing that whether you can possess cereal malt beverage and alcoholic liquor at the same restaurant. So we cleared up that confusion. With respect to conformance with the strategic plan, we've identified that we've said that Salina will be a city that is exciting to live in and thriving both economically and socially. That will be a place with a quality of life that appeals to residents and visitors, and that the city will work to make Salina a city that has connectivity physically and socially. In terms of the fiscal note and any costs, there are no identified costs for the city associated with this action. The permit fee would be $25, which is the same amount as the special event permit for cereal malt beverage special events. And then for your consideration, we've identified 3 possible action items. One would be to take no action on the attached ordinance, which would result in continuing the prohibition against possession and consumption of alcoholic liquor on public streets and city-owned property. You could amend the ordinance at your discretion, particularly the list of parks or city properties, or you could adopt ordinance number 12-10652, providing for the alcoholic beverages as amended and amending the cereal malt beverage retailers permits as described. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have. I know there is a representative of Ambucks here. They had made the initial request for the amendments last year that started us down that path. So as I said, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
One of the questions that came to me is whether this just governs, there's a lot of resale and sale language in this, whether it just governs that or whether this is, I know there's something that's done out at the mall that requires people to buy tickets, and there's different charitable tastings and things. Are those picked up under this or not? What governs those within the city?
I'm not completely an expert on that, but there is an entirely different statutory section that provides for charity events and tastings versus sale. And so there is a scenario which is statutorily compliant where you could have a tasting that wouldn't come through the special event permit process.
Mayor, the main emphasis for this is the consumption in public places as it's defined, and those would include public streets, alleys, roads, or highways. So this isn't intended to substitute the private property rights that are already out there by certain alcoholic license holders.
I guess my only question is on the buy center, the three days in a row, 4 times a year, is that going to be adequate, or is there a different provision that I'm not catching here that relates to the buy center?
We're able to hold a regular retailer's license.
Over there?
It doesn't have
Okay.
a time limit. This is specific to special events.
Okay.
And it is limited in duration and number.
Okay, so the buy center has its own private license over there, okay.
How do we come up with just these 4 locations? Jerry Ivy, Bill Burke, East Crawford, and Municipal Golf Course?
That was our best effort to review our parks and identify likely locations that we have requests for special events that would be in keeping with a community-wide event. That certainly can be amended now or between first reading and second reading. The ability to consume on streets is contemplated. So in the event that we would have an event that would close the street and incorporate it into some type of, say, downtown festival, that would be available on the street side. We needed to inventory actual parcels of land that the city owned.
And I do have a concern as well about Fall Fest and what we're looking at on the timeline for that transfer of Oakdale Park. I think that's going to be a pretty big weekend, and that includes Oktoberfest, so I do have a concern about
Yeah, I
that
think
transfer happening.
I think there's a couple of options in that regard. Cereal malt beverage is permitted. It doesn't require any additional action. Possession and consumption of cereal malt beverage in a park and city property is not regulated in the same way that alcoholic liquor, so that is a fallback position. The other
That's not
option-
city property.
No, what I'm saying is, the prohibition about consumption, possession, consumption, and sale on publicly owned property is specific to alcoholic liquor, so cereal malt beverage would still be an option, even though we don't own the property and we haven't exempted it. The other option, which AMBUCS can pursue, is the county, as the owner of that property, could take the step to make that permissible on their property while it's still titled in their name.
Other questions, comments, concerns of staff?
That's good.
Open it up to public comment. Did you?
Real quick, Mayor, I would like to add something. We discussed that it's sort of taken for granted that while this provides me with the ability to approve those special permits, certainly anyone who disagrees with my decision can take it to the city commission in a formal appeal. We didn't get that provision in here. We do have that with the other alcohol licensing provision, so that's something that we decided we could get that in there for you for the second reading, so that it's consistent language and that you even recognize that that's part of it.
For the appeal, yeah. Any public comment on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission for discussion and action.
Mayor, I move we adopt ordinance 12-10652 on first reading with the understanding that prior to second reading, we will have additional language regarding a direct appeal to the city commission if the applicant does not agree with the decision of the city manager.
Second?
Motion and a second to approve on first reading ordinance number 12-10653 with modifications allowing for an appeal of the city manager's decision to the city commission. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Item 8.5, award of construction of bid for Phase 1 of Fire Station Number 1 improvements, project number 082699.
Chief Mullikin.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. I am Larry Mullikin, your fire chief, and this project before you today is a culmination of 3 years' worth of work on the part of the fire department staff and architectural services, and a whole lot of people had to play into this project. I want to apologize to you for getting it to you a little bit late this weekend because it took a lot of last-minute time to cross some Ts and dot some Is and get the packet put together. It is a complex project, and what you have here is a complex package of information, and we're going to work through this thing this afternoon from the standpoint of, the good part for you is that you won't be hearing just from me. I'll get a chance to sit down here for a little bit and let Don Mars of DMA Architects talk about their work, how he arrived at this design, what it intends, what needs it intends to meet. And then you're going to hear from Rod France, our Director of Finance, to talk about the financial aspect of this project. And scattered throughout there, I'm sure you'll hear from the city manager and some other people. I want to take a second and point out that I have a number of staff members in the audience. Chief Kelsey, who's the battalion chief, Troy Long, who's the inspector investigator for us, Don Mars, of course, who I've already talked about and most of you pretty well know. Byron Erickson, who's the city's facilities superintendent, was part of that effort. Greg Brockway, who's the chief VMS, sitting in the back of the room. And Melody Elam, who's sitting over here, a business manager. And Melody wasn't expecting to run the projector this afternoon. And we sprang that on her. And Jack Ross, our director of CT's, kind of set aside Melody there and help her get through this process and things, because we do have a number of things to discuss this afternoon and try to work our way through. So with that, I'll kind of start off here and let Donnie come up here and get ready to jump up here and talk about some of the attachments, because I think what you're going to see is we're going to lead in this thing. Don will talk about some of the attachments that you're going to see up here on the screen and things of that nature. So let me talk just a little bit about how we started. We actually started, this talks about 2008, getting started on this project of what are going to be the needs for Fire Station 1 in 2008. Actually, the project in a very small form started in 2007, in the very beginnings of that, because we had money allocated to redo the administrative offices. And we are cramped down there. It's been a long time since we've updated the facility and the administrative offices, and the project was pretty small. When I say small, it was still significant dollars, about $700,000. As we started looking through the ideas of expanding the administrative offices or remodeling them, what came to light for us was the fact that we were dealing with a building that's over 60 years old, and that the backbone of the building and plumbing and how it's laid out was significantly aged to the point that it didn't make a whole lot of sense to go down this path and put nearly $1 million into administrative remodel without looking at the building in its entirety. At that point, we went out on this project for architectural services. We looked at proposals from architects, went through a selection process, and Don Mars of DMA Architects was selected to design and craft this project. Well, the first thing Don will tell you is that he came into the department and said, hey, what do you need? I realize the building's 60 years old. You're dealing with an electrical system, a plumbing system, a building layout that probably doesn't meet your needs today, 60 years later, but what are your needs moving forward? Because the worst thing you can do is plan a building for today. And he sat down with all the chief officers. The chief officers asked their personnel about what is it that you actually need to accomplish your mission and job and do it in a safe and efficient manner. And with that, out of that needs analysis came the first conceptual designs of the station. The station was built back in, Station 1 over here was built back in 1951. I'm going to Melody bring up the first picture here of an aerial overview. And you know, I feel kind of a sense of power here because I have Dean Andrews' laser pointer. This is Dean's baby, and he loaned it to me. I got to give it back. This first attachment is the aerial overview of Station 1 showing its current configuration there. There's a parking lot in the back. Our fire training center sits right here. We have a confined space entry training device right here that teaches firefighter skills when they go down below grade and that sort of stuff. We have parking here off to the west. And this configuration has basically been unchanged for the last 60 years. The building footprint is the very same building footprint as it was actually designed to be. And Don can come back to this aerial view if he wants to at some point. Melody will getting back to that. Give me the next picture here, Melody, if you will. This was the building, yeah, go right ahead. This was the building back in 1918 that was constructed for the city. This building sat at 149 North 5th. It was built for $20,000 at the time. You can see the age of the apparatus that sits out in front of that station. This station lasted for a little over 30 years. They realized that the equipment was getting bigger, that Station 1, Salina, was growing. We would have to have a bigger facility. And that's when the commission, back then, like yourself, was forced with the decision of saying, hey, what do we do? Do we build new? Do we stay where we're at? Do we build an additional facility? What do we do? They decided to build Fire Station 1. Go to the next one. There we go. This is actually a current view. This is just a picture snapped from across the street of Fire Station 1. Can you imagine going from that building that I just showed you in 1951 to this building? I mean, what a leap. What a leap for the city commission. What a leap for the community in the way of modernization and things of that nature, really driving the community forward. These are iconic buildings. Outside, I would dare to guess that outside the library, and perhaps the museum, if you want to include that, there are more people that come through this facility than any other city facility in the city. Almost all the children that were born and raised in this community at some point has been through this building several times, through field trips and things of that nature in school. But what's interesting is, or at least to me is back in 1951, this building was built for $172,000. And you think, well, the commission had a much easier time making that commitment rather than this project in its entirety for Phase 1 and Phase 2 is like $3.2 million. I will tell you this, when you take the dollars, take $172,000 and adjust it for inflation, that decision that they made was $2.4 million in today's dollars. That doesn't account for the inflation in the cost of actual construction itself. That's just a dollar adjusted for inflation is $2.4 million. That was a significant decision on the part of that commission in 1951 to set this building in place as a new structure for this community. And they did an excellent job. It lasted for 61 years to where we're at today. The only downside to this building, as it sets today, is that those apparatus doors that you see in front, those first four, are too small. The apparatus today have gotten larger and larger, and that was part of the reason why they decided to build a new station, because even the doors in the station built in 1918 were too small. And so when we look at what's going to happen in the future with our community, we're planning a long way out there to make this building last a number of years. In the commission report, my goal was, when I talked to Jason about it and we talked about the project, was to set in place a building and a design that would last you, or a project that would be a 50 to 60 year project where they would not have to come back for 50 or 60 years and do something again. But to get there, we were going to do a lot of changes, because certainly back in 1950, it was different than it is today in 2012. So with that, I'm going to stop for just a second and turn this over to Donnie and let him talk about the other attachments that go in here, because there are some conceptual concepts that people may want to see at home. The one thing that I think is really interesting here, as he comes up here, is that looking at this building and how it sits today, it's in a good location. People will talk about response times and things of that nature and building location. This building is in a good location for us. People can argue around the fringes as to whether there might be a better location for a station, but this is good. When you think about the Lee District development someday, if those condos go into place and things of that nature, this becomes very important because even though they'll be sprinkled, we need to have the right numbers of people responding within the right periods of time to make a difference in fires. And that efficiency and deployment of people and personnel is directly related to station location. So with that, I'm going to stop for a second and let Don jump up here and go through some of the conceptual things and what he learned in the process. And part of his contract not only is the design of this, but also to come down and execute the bid process. Execute the bid process and give us his best recommendations. So, Don, go ahead, Melody.
What you're going to see here in this attachment number 3 is an architectural rendering of what the building will look like once we've added the addition to it. And basically what we're adding above this, the round area here, there's a vertical line where the existing building stops now. We're adding a second floor to the existing first floor space that exists. Basically, it's above the current administrative office space in the building. Next slide, please. This is another view of the building with that addition. Next slide. This is the view then looking toward the southwest, the back of the building, and basically what we've added, there's a second floor that starts about right here and it wraps all the way around the first floor. To give you some round numbers on some things that we're dealing with. We have an existing building here that has approximately 18,000 square feet, a little less than 18,000 square feet of floor space in it. That includes a partial basement under the administrative office area. It includes the first floor office, the truck bays, and the second floor. What we're proposing when we're finished with the project is a building that will have a little over 20,000 square feet of space in it, which we're adding approximately 2,100 square feet above on the second floor. Plus, we have a bunk room addition that we're proposing. This is the first floor of the building, which we are not changing the footprint of the first floor in this phase of the project. The administrative office area is this area here, which is basically in that configuration today. The one thing we are adding is a passenger elevator that will get from the first floor to the second floor. The current basement that exists in the building is basically in this area, and it is purely a storage mechanical space. The current boiler that's in the building is in that location, and there's storage space in that area. The access to that basement is from this back stairway. The apparatus space as they are today will remain. There's a drive-through bay here, there's a drive-through bay on this side. We say drive-through, this bay is probably the only one that has enough space in the back to drive through. This bay has a larger apparatus in it, and it is backed in, and then there's actually a service area in the back here where a lot of the mechanical work that's done in the building. Current fire poles are in this location. We also have one back up here, which is where the hose tower exists in the building. Next slide, please. This is an overview now of what the second floor of the building will look like, and this is where the majority of the work takes place. One of the major tasks in this project is to facilitate a building that's going to continue to be operated 24/7 during the course of the construction. And how do we handle that, and how do we deal with that? Well, the way we're handling that is, first of all, the building addition we're putting on is basically this area here, everything to the right of that line. That addition will be built and enclosed, and that work will take place while the rest of the building continues to function as it does. The current bunk room is along the south side of the building in this area. The current meeting room space is along the north side of the building in this area. The administrative offices, which are located on first floor under this area, is the only area that's going to have to be relocated during the course of construction, because we have a number of foundation elements to put in to be able to support the second floor that we're adding on to the building. Once the second floor addition is enclosed, the first floor administrative offices are finished, then we will move into the second phase of construction, which is the remodel part of the existing second floor of the building. There's an add alternate to add bunk room space here on the second floor, which is a small addition, which you can see in your documents. During the second phase of the work, the bunk room area will be remodeled. So the meeting room space will be taken up so that the bunk rooms can be remodeled. The current bathrooms are in the building in this location. The new bathrooms will be in place so that the current bunk room, they can get to the new bathrooms during that remodel. Once the new bunk room is in place, then the existing bunk room will be moved to the north side, and then we'll remodel the rest of the second floor of the building. There'll be a short time during the course of the remodel of the last phase of this where the kitchen will be taken out of place. Next slide, please. We had a project that was, the final design was completed on this project in November of 2010. The final review of the documents and preparing to put this out to bid, we were authorized to begin that work shortly after the first of this year in 2012. The bids were solicited and bids were received on July 3rd. You can see a summary of all of the bids that we received for this project, which we had 6 bidders who submitted bids on the project. Those bids, you can see, ranged across from $1,198,072 as the low bidder. On the right-hand column is the architect's estimate of costs for the bids that we have. Now, there are 9 items that we're calling add alternates, and basically they are pieces of the project that were bid so that if you chose not to do the work, we could eliminate those items. Add alternate number 1 is the dormitory addition to the second floor of the building. One of the things that became evident during the course of doing the evaluation of the building was we do this work on this building now. What do we do about future needs in this building? Will there be ever needs for additional apparatus space? And that is part of what we're calling Phase 2. And we'll see that on a slide here later where we're adding 2 additional apparatus space to the building. We get to that point in the project with this facility, they're going to need additional bunk space. So that's why the additional bunk space was shown and built into this project. That's add alternate number 1. Add alternate number 2 has to do with emergency generator. The building has an emergency generator today, but it's not adequate to take care of the entire building today, nor will it be adequate to take care of the additional space that we're putting on. So during the course of designing the project, this was an item that was added to the scope of the work, was to put a standalone natural gas emergency generator that would accommodate emergency power for the entire facility. This building is what's considered an essential facility. It's essential because it's needed in times of emergencies, any kind of disaster, tornadoes, weather-related things that we have. So it's important that this building be able to function during those periods of time. So the emergency generation is a real key element to the building itself. That item here, when we originally estimated it at $100,000, wasn't covering the entire building, and we expanded that so that it would. So that's the reason for the cost being higher than what the original estimate was. Bid item, alternate bid item number 3 has to do with the EMS laundry shower facility. When the emergency medical people come back from an event, they may have things in their vehicles that they have to wash and clean, and we've created an area, a clean room, where they can physically take those items. It's a fairly large shower space. It is located where the current generator is located. So this item becomes necessary. If you take the generator, you create yourself the space to do the EMS space. So that is the reason that item was bid separately. We can't do that if the emergency generator is not moved to the new location. At alternate number 4 is the elevator equipment. This is the actual equipment that goes in the shaft. The shaft itself and all of the support for the elevator are part of the base bid. This was line itemed out as just as a separate item so that you could take consideration. The Americans with Disabilities Act requires this building to be accessible. The second floor of this building has meeting space on it. It is an item that relates to that. At alternate number 5 has to do with the day room expansion. If we expand the use of the facility bunk rooms wise, then we also need to consider that those people are going to be in that facility during the day or when they're not sleeping, and there needs to be adequate space to accommodate that. The current hose tower is no longer used to dry hoses, so what we've done on that is taken and made a second floor that would extend off of the current second floor into that hose tower to make a day room, to expand the day room services in the building. That is what alternate bid number 5 is. We get into alternate bids number 6, 7, and 8. And during the course of putting the documents together, we identified the fact that the current heating system that heats the apparatus bay on the first floor is a hot water system that is a boiler, functions in the basement to create the hot water. It's pumped through unit heaters, which is a coil that has a fan behind it, and it blows the hot air into the apparatus bay. We proposed a bid alternate that would replace that boiler and those water unit heaters with high-efficiency gas-fired unit heaters in the bay. That is what this item is listed here. This is an item that can be done at any time. It doesn't have to be done as part of this project. There's really no connection between anything that we're doing here, other than the fact we would be getting rid of the boiler. We would free some space up in the basement. I think that is part of the reason why this item was not recommended as an item to be considered in the final award. Same thing with the roofing system. The existing building's roofing system is 10 plus years old, Byron? 10 years. When we put the new mechanical equipment on the building, we will be modifying the roofing system because we're going to be cutting some additional holes in, putting some additional supports up. When we were bidding the project, we felt that we should give you at least the option to consider replacing the rest of the roof that is left after we add the various pieces of equipment to it. And that's what this line item was. If you accept this item, you basically end up with an entire new roof over the entire building versus part of the building with a roof that's 10 years old. There's some metal block letters on the front of the fire station which are fairly significant to it. It says Salina Fire Station, and they're metal, and they've not been repaired or maintained or repainted. They're going to have to come down during the course of construction, so we said, well, we should at least give you the option to restore them before they're put back up. That's what this light item has to do with. And then part of the furniture and fixture budgeting, part of the project was in the dormitory, having the dormitory locker units as their modular, their movable pieces of furniture that separate the bunk room spaces. We bid those as an ad alternate so that that could be, you'd know what the cost of those were, and if you want those put into the bid so that that can happen as the project sequences through, you can accept that item. So that is a summary in very general, quick terms as far as what the base bid and all the ad alternates relate to. From a base bid perspective, when we finish with this building, other than the apparatus bay heating system, which is an ad alternate that you may or may not accept, we will have an entirely new electrical system, entirely new plumbing system, entirely new mechanical heating and cooling system. for the entire building. We basically have a new building inside of an existing shell. We're dealing with a project here where if you take the total bids that we've received and divide them by the 20,000 square feet that we're basically dealing with, we're renovating this building for roughly $85 a square foot. If you were to try to replace this building with a 20,000 square foot building plus all of the support that you would need, we're dealing with a building cost that would probably be around in the $200 to $250 a square foot, or roughly a $5 million investment to replace what we have here. Been a lot of discussion about the viability of this building to support what we're doing. It's a very well-built building. It was done very well when it was constructed, and I think it will support the improvements that we're addressing today in the project that's before you. Next slide. I think I'll stop at this point. Entertain any questions that you might have concerning the scope of the project before we get into the actual recommendations and what is considerations need to be.
Questions at this point in time?
Nothing at this point.
When you're referring to the elevator, you mentioned that the need for it was based upon the ADA because the meeting room's on the second floor. If the meeting room is on the first floor, do we still need the elevator?
Yes.
The other question I had, I'm looking at bid number 4, the elevator equipment. For example, Bus Boom and Row has $45,000 and Cheney has $51,500. But they both identified the same elevator company. Do you know why the difference in
The
bid
difference,
amounts?
Commissioner, could be the amount that the general contractor may have marked that elevator bid up. They have coordination work. They have to handle the sequence between the subcontractor and the actual construction work.
Okay.
There's also no reason why the elevator company couldn't have gave different bids to different contractors as well.
Okay.
We don't have any control over that.
What is the estimated time to complete
The estimated
the
time,
project?
if you look on the bid form, there's calendar days to complete the project. And we had a range from 300 calendar days clear up to 540 calendar days. Cheney Construction was one of the 300 calendar days. We had a 360, a 365. So in my opinion, we're dealing with a project that's going to take somewhere between 10 and 12 months to complete the phases of the work. You know, there was also time built into the project that gets added to the contractor's time to allow the owner to physically move between the phases of the project. There's going to be some downtime. When we deal with a project such as this, where we have major remodel, we have material storage problems, there's not much room on the site, we have to keep the site pretty much open. One of the first things we'll be doing is sitting down with the contractor that's, if you award this project, sitting down with that contractor and going through a schedule that allows them to start procurement of materials, determine when those materials are anticipated to show up on the job site, and we'll go in and back up the time we need to prepare the building to receive those materials so that we can work that schedule out. So the calendar days bid will be used in the contract as the contract time, and then that contract time will be modified and adjusted as we work through the project to apply all the conditions that relate to what we're dealing with on the project.
So you're saying that the contract time can change
The contract,
as the knowledge of the project changes?
yes.
So then tell me how that would hold to any sort of damage days or anything that the city would have for protection of the project going haywire and just taking a long time.
That's a good question. during the initial part of this project, we will have the potential of having weather interference with the addition in the enclosure. The contractor is allowed to ask for weather days. We will conduct weekly progress meetings, and at those weekly progress meetings, we'll identify what's happened the prior week. If there is a weather day that's requested, then we'll identify whether and determine whether it is a weather day or not. So weather is an issue. Another thing that the contractor has the ability to ask for extensions in time has to do with material deliveries that are outside of his control. We have material, so we have a manufacturer, and let's say they have a strike that occurs, and that's something that's outside the contractor's control. Those things are brought to our attention on a weekly basis as we work through the project so that we know what the time issues are that we have to add or modify as we move forward. The contract time is set until something is adjusted and some reason to adjust that. The owner has the ultimate say in that because you will have to sign a change order for any time extensions on the project, and you'll have to be given a valid reason for that extension to occur. This project does have liquidated damages attached to it, and they're part of the project that's bid. That's why we keep track of the contract time, and we monitor that very closely.
And within that section for liquidated damages, are there things that address disruption of portions or all? I know that over this time between Chief, yourself, and multiple entities, there's been a lot of coordination to ensure minimal or no downtimes of areas, and it would seem like that would be a definite exposure that we would have towards just having downtime in portions or all of the facilities way beyond what we would anticipate, and then needing some sort of protection against that as well.
Good question. During the pre-bid conference, we had probably 40 or 50 people there at the building, and they had a very active period of time during the course of that pre-bid conference where we were interrupted numerous times, and I made it very clear that that was the condition that they would be working under, and that in no way would the construction process take precedence over the emergency calls that may occur during the course of construction. So if we have a situation here, it's our responsibility, we feel, that the facility continue to function, and that function takes priority over time in the case of what we're dealing with. So in the case of a typical progress meeting, we're going to discuss time. Was there an issue that you couldn't work because of some outside issue that occurred that was outside of your control? And if the answer is yes, we'll have to document what that was, and we'll present that accordingly. So the time on this project, even though it's a contract issue and we're going to monitor it closely, we're also going to monitor anything that disrupts that. And it could be an emergency call that disrupts that. And if that is the case, then we have to recognize that. And I think you recognize that as well.
The only other thing was on the furniture items in the bunkhouse, and the way I understand that is it's twofold. It's quality, but it's also the ability to change and adapt, to reconfigure that space as our needs change down the road. So it just seemed strange that furnishings required were an add alternate along the lines of quality. I would kind of expect that we would seek the same quality fixed or movable, but this allows us for reconfiguring of the space without a lot of work down the road. So that's the primary target.
There are a number of other furniture items that are listed here that the owner will be pursuing procurement on as the project unfolds that aren't necessarily things that a general construction contractor needs to be involved with.
Right.
Several issues come into play. Number one, we don't have to pick all those things out now ahead of time and then wait to purchase them. We can purchase them with the budgeting that we have, and they have some existing things that they can deal with. So there's a number of things like the kitchen equipment. It's not part of their bid. The cabinets are, but the kitchen equipment is not. They do have some items that they may be using. They may be purchasing some. So we chose to go ahead and bid the movable furniture in the bunk room because we have to have that in order to transition from one phase to the other. The other items are not contingent upon the operation of the facility because we have the ability to do that. So that's how we chose that item versus some of the others.
Okay, thank you.
And
I
it
think the
is-
fire
it does-
department has proven to us how creative they can be with selling old equipment and finding good deals.
That's true.
One question, Mr. Mars, on this, I was just noticing no bunk provisions for women. I assume we have some female firefighters?
We have 2 private bunk rooms.
Is that for them?
Yes.
Okay.
And
So if we ever get more than 2,
No. Generally speaking, that when you get into having female firefighters, they sleep in the same bunk rooms. at night.
Chief?
Oh, sorry, Chief.
I need to have you come up. Our folks at home are missing.
they're waving to you.
The 2 rooms that are essentially private rooms, one's for the battalion chief, one's for the medical officer. In the fact that they don't necessarily respond to all the calls, but there are calls that they respond to that the rest of the station does not. And that's the reason that they can be alerted separately and go to those calls without awakening the entire station and stuff. That's a fire service norm. Now, when women come into the fire service, they sleep in the same bunk rooms as the men do. The only thing that changes is the wearing apparel and things like that to bed. And that's really how you want it. You want an open bunk room with everybody sleeping in the same bunk room. So they do have separate shower facilities, things of that nature, but that's how it's done.
Okay, good.
Thank you. I forgot that. I gave the same question, and I got the same answer, so.
Sure. Oh, I guess one other thing you mentioned, I'm sorry, Chief, to keep getting back up for the microphone. Did I hear you right that you were saying that the doors are maybe a little low in the front? Are we addressing that on this remodel or no?
No. And in fact, what you're going to see in Phase 2 that Don's going to get into is that we actually expand the administrative offices by taking one of the current apparatus bays and making it into office space and building larger bays on the west end of the station.
On the other side.
Now, the linchpin in this design is on the building. When you look above the current apparatus doors,
Right.
that white stripe across the top that's about 20 inches, that's a support beam. We can't cut into that beam without compromising the strength of the building.
Is there any way to lower the drive and add drainage below, and should we be thinking about that at this stage of the game? Or is that not an option, or?
I don't think that's a real viable option
Okay.
because of the street level that we have in front. You may gain a foot, but you're not going to gain what you really need.
What you really need? How much room are we talking about? A few feet?
Well, yeah, we're talking
Yeah.
about 2 feet. Those doors are 12-foot wide doors. We could go to, the fire service minimum today is 14-foot doors, by at least 14-foot high. And those doors just don't cut it. A lot of stations today are doing 16-foot doors, 16 wide and 16 high. That may be a little extreme. But I will tell you how important it is that we look at this. In our latest ISO report, when they graded the city, we're in ISO Class 3, which is very good. We're in a very good class of cities. They said that we could become an ISO Class 2 city by simply moving our aerial platform from Station 2 to Station 1 and staffing that truck. Well, today you couldn't do that because Rescue 1 sits in that big bay. So we have no bay that the aerial platform will fit into. This will give us the flexibility in the future that if you think it's important for the city to be an ISO Class 2 city, we can accomplish that down the road. We just can't do it with our current configuration because the time, size of trucks have all changed.
Okay.
Since he's talking about this addition, I'd like to go to exhibit number 12. That's the very last exhibit, and
I see the fear in your eyes going, uh-oh.
as we work through the design and the concepts for this project, it was recognized that a future phase would be something that would be necessary in order to address some of the issues that Chief has just addressed here. And so we have prepared a very preliminary design. This shows 2 additional apparatus bays on the west side of the building. It's pushing a 40-foot addition across the front. This is the west side of the hose tower. We're putting doors on the south and also on the north to expand for the additional larger apparatus. There would be no second floor on this. We can make this as tall as we need it, so we have the ability to address the apparatus issue at that point. To address the administrative function, this piece right here is the current east bay in the building, which we're converting into office space. We're also remodeling the bathroom core. We're taking an office area here and making a bathroom core, and we're making a first floor administrative conference room in this area. We've made a few modifications in the chief's office and cleaned a hallway up in the process of what we're doing. The work that we're doing right now in the remodel of the first phase, all of those items, the light fixtures, the mechanical work, things that we're doing will be usable during the course of this modification, with the exception of this space that we're adding, which will have to heat and cool when we do the second portion of this. But this gives you some idea what the future phase would consist of to address some of the issues that are out there that may become a need in the future of this building. Any questions concerning that?
Don, real quick for clarification, if I'm skipping you ahead, I don't want to do that, but when we're talking about the furnishings, we do have the alternate for furnishings for the bunkhouse, but also we have the allowance for furnishings with the additional costs, and it might be good to distinguish those for everyone.
All right. Do we have that on an attachment? Or was that's probably in it?
It's on the 5th page of the blue sheet.
When you go to your blue sheet, and it's on page 5. In the middle of the page, there's a chart that we have identified the costs that are not part of the bids that you receive that are part of the overall budget for the project. There's a construction contingency of $42,000, $192,000 for the architectural design and project observation during construction. Then there's an $81,800 budget for furniture and equipment. There's a contingency on the administrative relocation, and your blue sheet has a little more description about how that may not be necessary. And then the same thing with the personnel relocation contingency, giving a subtotal on those items of $365,800. That cover what you needed, Dave?
Yeah, and Commissioners, the relevance of that is that the architectural design and project observation is already taken care of. But in the recommendation, we have the awarding of the bid, but there will be another action, which will be to allow you could do it as a total contingency of $92,000, which would include both construction and any relocation, and an allowance for furnishings and equipment up to $81,800. So that way that staff knows that that's in there. Otherwise, we really won't necessarily have that authorized in the project, and we really need it.
Does staff want to do you want to do your recommendation? Do you want me to go deal with that? During the course of bidding this project, my job is the head official and rules keeper of the procedure. And in doing that, in the part of the attachment that you have here is the recommendation letter that I put forward, and I went through the process and identified who did what and who didn't do what with regard to the project itself. We had a specific requirement that was identified in the bid documents originally, and it was also issued in an addendum that required the contractors to visit the job site During the pre-bid conference, we had so many people there, it was apparent to me that if all of those people decided to go through the station at one time, it would be way too disruptive. So I got with staff, and we set a procedure up, dates and times that contractors could visit the job. We required them to sign a register when they showed up, wear identification, and sign out when they left. And that procedure was followed, and we had a log. The log that we had, the contractors that bid on the job, Cheney Construction, did not sign the log. All of the other contractors did sign the log. I guess Bryant Construction Services, Bryant, did not either. We had an extensive list of contractor qualifications that were added to the bid documents, and I give you a summary under item C in my letter that goes through the cover letter that we asked for, the personnel documentation, similar construction experience, their financial and legal information, their bonding capacity, and you can read the results of those. Those were all fairly consistent. Past experience was identified, and then the correspondence that I had with the bidders themselves for the course of the project. The only other issue that came up during the bidding process, we had a bid form that they were supposed to turn their bid in on. Cheney Construction, on their initial bid submittal form, they did not complete all of the blanks. They did not list the subcontractors that they were proposing to use. There is a provision in the bidding instructions that allows a contractor to submit a modification to his bid, which Cheney did. He submitted that modification on his company letterhead and not on the bid form. When you took all of the information that was submitted, and you could physically fill out all the blanks that were on the bid form, but reporting to you the irregularities of how they submitted their bid, that those things did occur. I also received a call from Mr. Cheney after the bid opening and said that he listed the electrical sub contrary to who he intended to list. He listed one and would like to change that. You have, it's part of your blue sheet here, is determining, or at some point in time we have to determine whether we're going to allow that to be changed. My conclusion in my recommendation, I felt it was important that the contractors visit the job, especially in a building renovation project, and so for that reason, my recommendation to you was to reject Cheney's bid, because he didn't follow the procedure that was set out to visit the job. He subsequently was called and asked whether he did visit the job, and he told the staff person that called him that he did visit the job. So that is an irregularity. You'll have to decide whether or not you're willing to waive. Questions?
Aside from those that you noted, you did note that one other contractor might not have signed the log. Is that right?
Yes, and they're not being considered. I mean, it's Construction Services, Bryant, their bid is considerably higher than the others.
No, they're still on the list, though.
They're still on the list, yeah.
What other, when you were cruising through each and every one of these other bidders, was there work that was done to assess each and every one, or just this low bidder for qualifications?
We assessed the two low bidders.
Okay.
We did not go through and assess any other bidders than the two low bidders.
Okay.
If I could just interject this, at this point, we get all this information back. Don has given us his best recommendation on what he believes is the right thing. And then we submitted all that information to the city manager's office for review. Because we don't execute contracts like this very often. It's 60 years since we did a project of this scale and things of that nature. And they do a lot more on different projects and different departments and things of that nature. And Jason, as the city manager, kind of led that review team over at the manager's office, and some of the things that you see in the blue sheet that I think he'll speak to here are some things that you need to consider and where we came down to in this bid right here. So what are those recommendations? So Jason, you want to talk to me?
Yeah, Commissioners, I think one of the things that we considered is on page 4 of your blue sheet. It shows a section, it shows a couple sections that are pretty relevant here, and I think takes into consideration everything that Don had talked about. And Don did an excellent job of going through and looking at the two bidders. First, we talk about rejection of bids. You have the right to reject any or all bids. That's a right that the commission has. The next section, 5.3, acceptance of bid award, is one that probably the focus is. It has two things. One, it reiterates that you have the right to waive informalities and irregularities in a bid received and to accept the bid which in your judgment is in your best interest. You could look at that and say, well, you can look at these and in your mind conclude that, well, we have a better best scenario, possibly. It's easy to do that. The first part of 5.3, though, the first sentence above that indicates it is the intent of the owner to award a contract to the lowest qualified bidder, provided the bid has been submitted in accordance with the requirements of the bidding documents and does not exceed the funds available. In this particular case, the low bid does not, well, they all exceed the funds available per se. Your fiscal note does indicate that we're going to have to modify the bond authorization, so technically they all exceed that. The low bid is below the architect's estimate. The other bids are all above the architect's estimate, just to give you a little bit of relative comparison. But in this particular case, the way we have historically practiced this requirement is that, in essence, if you believe based on the information provided, that the low bidder cannot do the job, that you have no confidence, you would reject their bid, you would go to the next bidder. We typically have looked at it as we don't believe they're qualified to do a good job for us versus, say, a best, a better best kind of scenario. And in looking at that, we, again, that's why we checked on the job site visit, and they did indicate that they visited. We do not have that on the log because they did fill out the log, but they did indicate that. We felt it was worth a follow-up. So you can take that however you'd like to take that. And there were some other minor irregularities, and that's why the staff does recommend that if you do go with the low bid, that you officially waive the irregularities. But what you have to do when you look at those, whether you consider them irregularities or abnormalities or whatever it is, informalities, better go with the right word, informalities. It's about how much merit you put in those affecting the ability of the contractor to do the job that you're asking them to do. How material is that issue? That's how and it's really up to you to place your judgment on that. We initially believed that those are pretty minor. We did call, Don did a great job and talked to other folks, the architects, and got good information back on both of those. We had staff call the owners of projects. We did mention in here there was a lukewarm reference for Cheney on a project in town recently. The city of Salina used Cheney for a bicentennial center. They did a good job for us there. Had a little bit of follow-up at the very end on some of the minor punch list items that took a little bit longer, but part of that, quite honestly, is because we were working in and out of so many events going on in there. It was a little bit difficult to not disrupt. But all in all, that project went pretty well. And so besides the one lukewarm reference, the rest are pretty consistently good. Bauer has good or excellent references as well. We wanted to be sure and disclose all that to you. So really, it's up to you in putting that together and determine if you think from an irregularity or informality perspective, whether those are material, or if you believe from the information based on references that suggests that either of the contractors is not capable of doing a good job for you, and you don't want to risk that, so you would choose the other, whether it be the low bid or whether it be the second low. But we typically would look at, you take that low bid and they're in the driver's seat until you decide that you want to reject it because you don't think they're capable of doing it before you would consider the second. That's how we practice it. So anyway, I wanted to take you through that, and you may have some questions about that. And I think when you look at this, you have a few decisions to make too. I want to help line that out. The first is are you leaning towards the low bidder or the second bidder? We need to get through that point. And I think that will not affect necessarily which alternates you choose. If you went with, when you look at the bids, the low bidder is low on all the alternates but one, so if by chance you only chose to bid one alternate, it could change it a little bit, but the low bidder would still be the low bidder. So because you're dealing, unless you would want to go into third bidder and up, it's not going to affect anything. So you can really distinguish those two decisions. One, the bidder initially, and then secondly, the alternates, and then the cost contingencies that we talked about just a few minutes ago. So I think we'd be happy to take any questions you have. You may want to discuss that. Of course, Don can answer any questions based on work that he's done, chief and so forth. So.
In the investigation of the references for both the low bidders, did we seek projects on our own, or did we use a reference list that was supplied by the bidder? In essence, somebody on an application gives a reference, of course, they, in all probability, would be good ones. So did we homework ourselves outside of what they had furnished? And were they pretty comparable, hectic job sites, lots of interruptions and size, scope, magnitude, mechanical, electrical, structural, those kind of issues?
Yeah, my understanding is from what staff checked with regards to the owners of past projects, that we followed those projects that were listed in there. In addition, we went back and looked at reviewed our own notes for the Bicentennial Center project. One of the projects in town by the low bidder, Cheney, was the community theater. I think probably the community theater to a degree, and well, I would say for sure also the Bicentennial Center. We know those were probably, from a scheduling perspective, had issues and quite a significant amount of mechanical, electrical, some of that type of thing. That's probably the limit to my knowledge with that. And with regard to Bauer, I think Chief can probably give you a little more information on that.
We, Melody and I actually executed all those reference calls, and all of the bid packets came in with letters of reference. Every one of them's glowing, but they also submit a list of past projects that are not necessarily tied to those letters. What we did is we called those project managers and talked to the people who ran those projects and asked them what their reactions were and how they executed the job. And then we got varying degrees of comments. I can just tell you we didn't have any. They spoke about Bauer in glowing terms, and we only had a few lukewarm kind of things with Cheney. One school superintendent told me that, and it's probably in the material there, that it depends on the superintendent you have on the job. He says if you have Todd on the job, you'll have a great job. And he said if it's not Todd, I'm not sure. And those are the kinds of things that you hear coming back, and quite honestly, it's one of those things that as you work your way through it, when they tell you that sort of Cheney can do an adequate job with no glowing terms, you're going, I don't know. They're hesitant to, I hate to say be forthcoming, but you're asking them and they're trying to, because, to be quite honest about it, not every problem in a job is the contractor's fault. Sometimes it's the design professional, sometimes it's the supplier, sometimes it's the actual building owner causing problems that really the contractor has no control over. So you take all that, I think, with a grain of salt, and you realize, can they be successful? And the only thing I have to add to it is what you've seen already, is that this is a very complex project, very complex, because it deals with an older building, it deals with an operation that's 24/7. I think that it's going to take an inordinate amount of time on the contractor's part to make this very successful for them. There's lots of pitfalls in it. Melanie, do you have anything to add that you think that you want to add to it? Because you talked to some too. So. Okay.
Seems to me Mr. Mars was extremely forthcoming in his letter on his experience with both companies. And as long as it's, I'm going to say, proper for us to rely also on Mr. Mars' letter and his experience in dealing with both of those companies, I'm leaning towards Bauer, just based upon the information you gave us this evening in Mr. Mars' correspondence regarding his interactions with both contractors.
And I think that's fine. I think one thing to note that the project related to the airport was over 10 years ago. There was a comment from one of the references that made mention that their experience has been good in the last 5 years. Quite honestly, you can go all over the place. the fact is what I look for is when I look for, is there a reason to reject a low bid? I'm asking everyone, give me references, because at this point, I've not seen one. And unless you want to decide on irregularity because they didn't sign a log form.
Well, I think you take that all in as a whole. I mean, it shows how
Right.
they're already beginning the project as opposed to those ones that did go with the guidelines and followed.
Yeah, it could. You see things like that from time to time, though, in bidding scenarios because of the paperwork. That's not necessarily something that you wouldn't see. But the key then is to wait and say, what do we see materially? We have our own experience with low bidder, and it was fine. That I know. That's all I know. I can tell you that I know. The rest of it, Larry's right. You don't always know because there can be problems that are maybe a little bit of everybody's fault. A change that the owner wants, something, maybe a design left off that they're trying to deal with. You just don't know, and it's really hard to get that 100%. I know what happened. You can be in the project and not know exactly what happened sometimes. But anyway, I was looking for, if the low bidder is not going to get the award, provide material performance reasons for that, and we really didn't get any. And so certainly, I think the difference in price is about, what, $60,000 roughly? So it's from a percentage of the project, it's not tremendously significant, but the key for you to know is, and what staff is communicating, is you can go with whichever one you want, and I think personally that you're going to get a good project either way you go. That's what I believe. But it's certainly a decision in your realm. If you feel like there's a higher confidence in the second low bidder, that's up to you guys to decide to make that decision. But there's just a question as to whether you're rejecting the low bidder or going with the better best scenario. I just didn't find a reason to reject the low bidder.
As you kind of think through that a little bit and kind of have that settled, would you be objective to us moving on to the fiscal note? I know Rod France chomping at the bit to get up here and talk dollars and cents to
He
us.
just wants to go home.
So,
Yeah.
so with that, we'll move on to the fiscal note, and we'll come back to the recommendations that was before you tonight at the end of this.
And Commissioners, just before we do that, I'll let you pick your own timing, but I do know we have representatives of, I don't know if we have both contractors here or not. I don't know if you want, if they have that opportunity to speak, if you want them to do it now under the theme that we've been speaking, or if you want to come back to that later, it's certainly up to you. I just want you to be sure to know that they are here and can speak, maybe answer any questions you might have for them.
I don't know, are you able to hold all questions and part them out later, or do you want to speak with the...
Myself.
Well, we could take a 5-minute break.
Maybe, yeah.
It wouldn't break my heart. You go ahead and...
Come back to it. Yeah, I'll make a motion that we'll take a 5-minute break and return to this at, maybe just 8 minutes before, so 5:52.
Second.
Yeah, we have a motion and a second that has a few smiling faces in the audience, so all those in favor of taking a 5-minute recess from our meeting, say aye. Those opposed, we're in slight recess.
Kansas is funded by
Icon, decades worth of variations on how to please your man. She too had become an icon of ruthless glamour, wealth, and sexual freedom.
General session. Before we took our recess, the question at hand was whether anybody wanted to entertain any questions to the contractors that are present now, or just hold those until the end of the full discussion. So is there a preference there? I maybe prefer we move through all of the meat of the materials and then go through each.
Yeah.
If that's okay.
Reasonable.
Yeah. Okay. So Chief, it's back in your hands, or Mr. Franz?
Well, I tell you, it's my pleasure to introduce Rod France.
Thank you, Chief. So, best introduction you've received in a long time, isn't it?
I was actually thinking about leaving during the break.
Hey, now.
So was I.
This project was initially authorized in 2009. At that time, the estimated cost was $1,787,000. We did sell bonds for the project as a part of the 2010 issue. And after accounting for costs that have been incurred so far, which are largely design, and there would be some miscellaneous issuance costs and so on, in that we are left at this point holding about $1,550,000. So to fully fund all aspects of the project is going to take about $2,086,000. That includes some potential temp housing costs if necessary, includes contingencies and so on. Annual cost for that additional amount will be about $42,000 a year if we issue bonds for it. And that would be the obvious option, is we could do a supplemental authorization and then at some point go ahead and sell bonds. It's about an additional $500,000, I believe. The other option would be to consider it as a special sales tax item at some point. Even if we did that, I would suggest that there would be a need to go ahead and authorize the project as a bonded project, and then we would decide later, at the time the project was finishing up and we've got actual physical costs in hand, how best to proceed with that. But once it's authorized, we could then pick and choose either way. I guess that pretty much handles it for this phase of the project. I'd be glad to handle any questions.
You might need a pencil and paper, but
Okay.
I tried to work the math in all different directions to get there. I first took this $385,800 that's on that fifth page, I think, and incorporated that with the low bid amount, assuming that would take into account the base and all of those items, and I came up with that $2,029,000. So then the difference between that and the $2,086,000.
I believe that I started with the second low bid when I worked that.
Okay. And because okay, so you assumed the second low bid of that $1,710,000. Okay.
To be honest,
that would probably account for the difference, because I came out with using that low bid, a difference of $242,000 for financing.
Yeah.
But then the items from one. Okay. All right.
If you hold my feet to the fire, I would have to tell you that I don't remember specifically what I did, but that's what I think I did.
Yeah. No. Okay, I think I'm somewhat just voicing my concern of an approval of a project of a certain amount of funds based upon something that's moved forward. And quite a bit of funds have been extended for some fees and some design, and we still have quite a bit to go, which seems to have exhausted quite a bit of monies that haven't been taken into account. So that I was just trying to get a handle on that. We started out with $1,787,000, and we're at $1,550,000. And in order to get going on a project that is $2,030,000 or $2,100,000, depending upon which bidder you move.
I guess I'm not sure I understand the question completely.
What all have the funds been extended for, and were any of those now duplicated because we haven't moved the project along and we've changed the scope, or?
I would say no. The bulk of the funds have been extended to pay for the design contracts, which are still underway. There's still an amount encumbered there that has not been paid. There were also closing costs on the bond issue, which would have amounted to, I don't know, $20,000 maybe. I don't remember what those were.
Okay, and those design costs and things are above and beyond 182,000 or included in that 192,000?
They are included in that 192,000,
Okay. Okay.
if I'm reading it correctly.
Yeah, Commissioner, that's the...
So a large portion of that 192,000 has already been paid?
Yes, yeah, it's already obligated, so that's a bit redundant showing that,
Right,
because that
okay.
is under contract,
Okay.
the others aren't.
Yeah, I'm caught up. All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions of
Chief,
Mr. Franz?
real
Chief.
quick, just a knowledge question. You mentioned the rating change on phase 2 of doing that. Will that affect insurance rates or anything for people? It does not affect
No, in
insurance
fact,
rates?
when I was talking to Jason about it, I was shocked and surprised that I thought if we dropped from the ISO 3 to a 2, generally it doesn't affect residentials, but it would affect commercial rates. Would be a nice caveat for an advertising for a community. Say we're an ISO 2 city and there's only 2 of them in Kansas. And when I talk to the insurance companies, they're going more on loss experience instead of ISO ratings right now. They're more heavily on that. So
Sure.
there's no real benefit to drop it to an ISO class 2 other than bragging rights today.
Sure.
It may change in the future, but today it's just bragging rights.
Either way, we probably need this phase 2 at some point brought up. I mean, more so than just to get a lower rating. I don't want to spend $1 million for a number, but...
Exactly.
mean-
And the thing of it is, what happens to us is that we take on more and more all the time, the trucks get bigger, and, right now we staff our rescue squad, our rescue truck with two guys on it. Eventually, you're going to want to do that. I'm going to be retired someday. But after I'm retired someday, you're going to want to put 4 people on that, because that technology part of that rescue squad, knowing how airbags are done, electric vehicles, and all types of alternate energies and things like that, is just beyond what the normal firefighter can keep in. We need resident experts, and our rescue people will be those resident experts. Someday you'll want to be there.
So it's more important for growth, not necessarily just ratings or
Right.
perceived protection. This is a real need.
Well, and I'll tell you, Calvin, as one of the battalion chiefs, they grapple all the time about moving apparatus here, moving apparatus there. Having sufficient and modernized apparatus space will allow them more flexibility in moving apparatus around.
To where the need is. Okay?
With that, you've heard from me, you've heard from Don, and you've heard from Rod, and we're really kind of boiling down to the recommendation part of this commission report. And we're going to walk through those in just a second. I do want to tell you this, that when we did all the ad alternates in this project, it wasn't the fact that they weren't needed. It was the fact that we thought we could have other workarounds to bring them into play. That just like the letters on top of the building is a good example. There's like $800 or $900, and Don wanted to pull those off and powder coat them and put them back up there, make them really look good when the building's open. My thing is, I think we ought to take them down, put new LED lights in them, make it a deco showpiece and put it back up there. I don't think we can do it for $800. I'd really do it with the line item, put a little more money into it down the road. So that's the reason, when we look at the recommendations on the fire administration, why that wasn't in there, because we can do that in conversations I've had at the manager's office. We can do that as a line item and really kind of boost it up a little bit and make it more of a showpiece. Because, and I don't mean to be flippant about it, I think people take a lot of pride in that facility and what they would do for it. And when you read, when that building was open, the chief at the time, Chief Travis, said that they had 2,500 people walk through that station and were just awestruck with what they had provided for their community. And they were proud, they were tickled with the facility. And that's really what, even in that listing of furniture that you saw in that commission attachment there about the furnishings we're going to replace, we're not going to throw that stuff out. It lists 3 refrigerators. We're going to take those refrigerators that we need to replace and look at our stations and say, what's our 3 oldest ones, where we're having problems? We'll put those refrigerators out there and get rid of our 3 dumpiest ones that we have out there in those stations. The bedding and things of that nature. The only instructions I gave the chief officers was to go through what we are currently using and identify anything that would make the citizens feel proud to walk through that building and see what they had invested their money in. Give us a bare bones list, and that's what they came up with. So with that, I'll move on down into the recommendation phase of this commission report and talk just a little bit about, and Jason, this is really complex, and Jason probably has a better handle in explaining this to you than what I do, as far as you taking these two actions and even bid irregularities if you choose to do different actions than what we've recommended here. It says the commission requested to consider two actions with regard to this item. Take action on the Phase 1 bid award and directing the inclusion of Phase 2 in the capital improvement program. That's vitally important for you to understand. That second phase has got to be included in this, or we're just spinning our wheels. We're not gaining anything. Action item 1, approve all project and alternates, associated costs, and award the construction bid to Cheney Construction for $1,663,201. Number 2, approve add alternates 2, 3, 4, 5, and 9, which is ones that we recommended, and award the construction project for $1,554,340. Approve a commission-selected number of add alternates and associated costs, and award the construction bid to the contractor selected by the commission. I want to stop there and let Jason take this on here with you, because this is over my head a little bit.
Thank you, Chief. Just real quick on the alternates 6 and 7 that are not recommended. Larry kind of addressed 8. 6 is the floor heater replacement, and the heater replacement does give you, if you should choose to go with it, we've focused a lot on energy efficiency in certain projects. That one gives you a payback. I'm not sure. Don maybe could give you a better answer on how many years, but it would have a payback for you. It's more of an efficiency improvement than anything else. And then the roof system could be a wait and see. If we look at it, and you do go with Phase 2, we could look at the roof as part of Phase 2. So we could still address the roof as part of Phase 2. If you really aren't interested in the Phase 2, I think Chief's right. We've got to rethink this project, because I don't know that we'd recommend investing a tremendous amount of money into this station if we didn't make it what we needed for the next 30 to 50 years. I think that's a discussion we'd need to have. But I believe the roof probably could wait pending a Phase 2 and the results of the actual project. I'd look at these guys to nod one way or another and tell me don't know what you're talking about, or okay. But so taking those into consideration, and as I mentioned, your thoughts on who to go with is perfectly fine either way. Just wanted to be fair in how we typically represent that a little bit, and then it's in your lap to do what you'd like to do. But I think there are, so the staff report does have Cheney Construction. Certainly there's consideration for Bauer, the number 2 bid, based on what you've heard, which is perfectly fine. I think the key for us is whichever way you go, it's real easy in a lot of communities to build things that are new, and it's usually difficult to put emphasis in any kind of facility. There's no question. It's just a hard thing for a governing body to do. But quite a few years ago, we did a station location analysis, and that said that station number 1 needs to be where it is, and that's the heart of all this. It's the heart of training. It's the heart of response, followed by station 2. It's the heart of just about everything we do. And Larry's right. There's a bit of a architectural icon there as well, and a piece of Salina. If you didn't invest in that station, you built a new station. Don's kind of indicated what that cost might be. So even if you do both of these phases, you could easily spend more dollars on a new station than refurbishing this. And then you also have property acquisition. That's an aspect of that as well. So it is a big long-term decision, and we know that, and we don't take that lightly either. But our thoughts are we think we should be thinking long-term, and that's what we presented as a project that's long-term. We're a little disappointed as well that in the end, the total project is a little more expensive than what we'd anticipated when we started. There's no question about that. We'll admit that. It really is. But we think we have competitive bids. We had a lot of bidders. In the end, you try to guess on the front end. You try to incorporate the things you need to, but the bidding kind of gives you the reality of it. And that's just the way that works. And the emphasis that we had on the estimate before was more of a staff-driven estimate, and we were off some on that, and that happens. So the key is regardless of who you go with, is to do what you feel is the right thing for this project in the future, whatever that might be. And certainly we fully support that, and we'll do the very best job we can to make it work well for everybody. So. If there are any other questions you might have, please feel free to ask. We'll try to answer those the best that we can to make sure that you feel comfortable in your decision.
So we're really talking about Phase 1 and 2 here, really. I mean, we're kind of
Yeah, before we were talking about Phase 2, and it took me a while to come around to realize how why Phase 2 is so important in Phase 1. But ultimately, Larry's right, the vehicles are growing. We've already outgrown some of our bays. We're going to have to address that. This is the station, and the reason is because we already have rescue equipment, we have hazmat equipment. The role of the fire service has changed a lot in the last 20 or 30 years, and that's part of it as well. And this station is that central core for hazmat response and other types of response, and so we can utilize that space. We can have the base for the larger equipment. It really does fit into the long term. And the thinking is if you have the financial capacity to deal with it, put it in your CIP, and we had Rod spend a lot of time analyzing that, it makes sense to just bite the bullet, get the whole thing done if you can, rather than wait 5 years or 7 years or 10 years and then redebate it, because your cost for construction, we believe, are still very competitive as a whole.
Right.
Interest rates are still very low, so you can issue the debt at a very low interest rate at this point in time. So because of those reasons, the timing looks pretty good for continuity there. But truly, you could wait. If you wanted to do that later, you really could do that, but I think the timing does help you some.
Well, one is an extremely important, house they all are. But it's very different for the citizens to understand everything that goes on in one compared to Station 3 or Station 4. And you alluded to some of those with hazmat response. We also have the training center. We also have fire marshal. We have so many different support positions and things that go on inside of one that kind of make it the headquarters, if you will. So I think it's a very important station, not just to meet the fire response needs, but understand that there's an overwhelming amount of needs that come to the citizens out of one that don't out of some of the other stations in town. So and understanding of Phase 2. If Phase 1 has a lot of importance in the way of Phase 2, then I think that the both need to be considered together, and we don't need to do an injustice by approving Phase 1 that's really not going to meet the long-term needs of the station, and then straddling the burden of a future commission, to have to fulfill the commitment that's right for Station 1 and for the community. That's just my little narrative on it.
I agree, but I hate to move forward presuming that Station 2 is going to be an increase in the mill levy as opposed to first directing staff to look at cuts in Phase 2, looking at cuts in other areas of the budget or some other means other than presuming an increase in the mill levy associated with Phase 2.
So that
Page 6.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That if we're saying we're in favor of this Phase 2, we're not necessarily saying that we're in favor of implementing a mill rate change right away to pay for it versus trying to see how it falls within the rest of the CIP.
How the budget, right, what the budget is
overall.
at that point.
Yeah, well, and when you look at the mill levy projections, we have, and they are somewhat projections because you don't know how your values are going to come in. And Rod shows the 2000, well, really, you probably have to look at 2015, I believe, to make sure you're looking at that correctly. But your difference is 3/10 of a mill levy. And what's happening during that time, it's 3/10 of a mill levy from what it would be otherwise, but it's actually still declining, and the whole mill levy as a whole is still declining. It's a matter of how much you'd want it to decline. So for clarity, I want to make sure that there's an understanding that, and I need to point to Rod here, because in 2014 we show a mill levy projection of from 6.03 to 6.7, and I'm presuming that would or would not be a result of the project.
From 13 to 14? That is not a result of the project.
So that's a current projection
anyway.
outside of the project, and that's why you see the revised is exactly the same. So at that point, you're stepping down the mill levy. It's just you're not going to step it down as much if you have another project thrown in there. So you're going to be you're going to show it going up. Now, when we say showing it going up, doesn't mean you have a tax increase, mill levy increase to the public, because we've done a pretty good job of trying to figure out a way not to do that for you, and certainly we'll try to do that again for you. So in essence, the impact of this project would only impact the rate at which your mill levy would decline in the future, presuming you don't add any other capital projects that are financed by debt.
Well, except for 15, 16, and 17.
No,
No, you're still going down.
Projection's 5.8, the revised is 6.4.
Right,
Yeah,
it affects
but
you going down
that's lower than it
still.
was the prior year. In
But
other words, it's still
Not as low because.
not as low.
Right,
as
that's
this
what I mean. It affects how much it goes down, but you're
Right.
still on a pace downward. What you're deciding to do is, because what you typically do is, and in the debt pro forma, we say, generally, what would be the debt of dollars that we'd want to apply for capital improvement projects? And that affects the mill levy as part of that formula. And what happens is as you pay off things, you have other needs. Could be a street project, could be a building project, who knows what it is. You throw that in, so if instead of your mill dropping from, say, 6 to 5, you throw it in, it might drop from 6 to 5.5, because you're going to have needs you're going to throw in the future. What you'd be saying here is that this would be a priority need. You put it in, your mill levy will still go down, just not as much as it would otherwise.
I don't know that, I was looking for an explanation, but I'm not willing to say that. What I'm willing to say is if there are no other options, maybe the mill levy doesn't decrease by as much, but the first option should be to look for other places in the budget to find the money.
Sure.
Well, we always
Instead
do
of
that.
moving forward presuming
Yeah.
that this is, that we're not going to go down as much because of this
Yeah,
budget.
our point of this, is just to indicate to you that you still have the ability, if you should choose, for your mill levy to be reduced at some amount. That's it, nothing more, nothing less, because we know that the actual number varies based on a lot of factors. Yeah, so hopefully that helps.
Okay.
I just feel like the money is relatively cheap right now, and the city has some infrastructure that needs to be redone, and it's probably as good a time as any to do it, and if we can do it without increasing our mill levy, and again, looking for cuts first before even heading to the mill levy. I mean, I say we need to look at both phases as one project, maybe saving some money on this secondary, because we haven't done bids on the second project, I believe. So, the complete project may come in saving a little bit of money overall. I mean, it just,
Yeah.
like I said, I've been impressed with the bids. Most of the bids that we've had come in to the city over the last year, and, maybe this is just the best time to do them both. Doing one, and there's going to be some more design costs that could maybe be alleviated if we do them as one project, so.
Yep. Well, that really kind of leaves us with a little bit of discussion that we've had on phase 1 and phase 2, but we really haven't had a meaty discussion on the comfort of the contractor and the bid process, the requests submitted by the architect so far, and I think that may or may not need to be a consideration. I mean, depending upon, I guess, the commissioner making the motion, but if there's discussion that needs to happen to make sure that we have comfort there, I think that needs to happen at this point in time.
Well, I think we could hear from both of them, but again, I think if we're looking at maybe a complete resubmittal of these as two phases, as one, maybe is that a consideration? Making the two phases one phase, and perhaps even sending this out as a new bid process, or are we still looking at trying to bid it in two phases?
Oh, I think you're definitely looking at awarding bid on the first phase, so you get that moving, and then what would happen is if you put the second phase in the CIP, we'll begin design in 2013, and hopefully be able to look at construction for the most part as soon as phase 1 is over, and that also helps us to plan for that transition as well with phase 1 to phase 2.
Right.
Okay.
I'd agree with that.
Mayor, if I may.
Please.
If the commission would be inclined, I would appreciate the opportunity to discuss a matter subject to the attorney-client privilege with you. I do want to assure everyone that the purpose of that would not to be to discuss the relative merits of the bidders. That I do not think is appropriate for that closed discussion. It would be strictly a legal matter related to the circumstances that you're presented with. Now, whether that occurs at whatever point in time you might find that most helpful, not knowing exactly what it is, but I didn't want to dictate the order of events, but if it would be appropriate, I would appreciate that opportunity.
Okay. Well, I think we stand at a point where we want to, unless I'm wrong, where we want to kind of discuss the contractor selection issue and part out a motion on ways to proceed. So if this is a good time to do that executive session, we can come back and hear from the public, including the contractor, and work it through, then this might be the best time to do that.
So go ahead and do an attorney-client. Okay.
How many minutes?
10?
10? Okay. I move we recess into executive session for 10 minutes to discuss the legal counsel matters subject to attorney-client privilege for the reason that public discussion of those matters would waive the privilege and adversely affect the city's interest in the matters, and reconvene at 6:32 p.m.
Second?
Motion and a second to move into executive session for attorney-client privileges and return in 10 minutes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed, we're now in executive session.
.org.
Partly to mostly cloudy overnight with a chance for thunderstorms and lows of 60 to 65.
And forces attack U.S. or coalition troops. Pentagon spokesman George Little says there's no way to bring risk down to zero on the battlefield.
I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We will return from executive session into general session. We are on item 8.5, discussing projects at our fire station number 1. And I believe at this point in time we've heard from staff, we've heard from our architect, we've asked questions of our finance manager. And at this point in time, we really want to probably go through the project and discuss maybe the add alternates and see if there's questions of staff that come up during that, and then we can talk about, talk with any contractors and citizens that are in front of us. So within the add alternates, are there specific questions of any of those or discussion? I guess one of the questions that I would ask is, the staff recommendation was without add alternate 6, 7, and 8. I see 8 as kind of an important preservation thing toward the firehouse. It is a pretty low cost. I'm very leery, even though it shows up as a low-cost item, of not replacing the roofing system with a lot of different work. You're going to know that you need it when you're all of a sudden having a lot of problems underneath the roof, protecting what you just got done modifying. So I think that if that's an item that could be required, I think it might be prudent to do it in advance. And the first floor heating system, I guess there was a little conversation earlier on the part of city manager that might have some payback potential to it, and maybe Chief or Donnie could address whether that's a kind of a long-term or a short-term.
Well, I think Don and Byron would probably speak to the cost-saving aspect of it. I can just tell you the boiler was put down there in 91. There was 2 of them. One's functional now, and we can't heat the apparatus for us. It's never our intention not to do the heater replacement. It was our intention only to ship it to the second phase or things of that nature, do it some other way. But you want to talk about the cost savings now?
The building had 2 boilers initially. The apparatus floor in the driveway out in front of the building used to be heated. They had paving issues, piping issues, and one of the boilers was taken out of service. The other boiler continued to function to heat, to fire these unit heaters, plus also heat the rest of the building. Now we're down just to the unit heater. So we've got a drastically oversized boiler that's running at about 50% efficiency. And we're talking about replacing it with gas-fired unit heaters that are going to run about 95% efficient. So you're going to see roughly a 50% savings if the boiler was firing only at the rate it needed to be. So the payback on this really is half of your gas, and we'd have to look at the gas consumption in the building to determine what that amounts to, but we're dealing with a relatively short payback.
Yeah, and you're talking about the boiler that has inspections towards it and costs ongoing associated with that and refractory things and, okay.
But Chief is absolutely right, that you'll have to do it as part of phase 2 if you don't do it in phase 1.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I would tend to agree and go along with those. The sign thing, I would still hold off because I like where Chief was going. I think it's a very important part of the building, and I think you're right, the 1,000's a little low. I'd be happy to include it, but I don't think we know that number now, but I agree with you. I think it's a showpiece for it, needs to be represented as well. So I don't know if it's better to...
Yeah, as long as we know you don't mind doing something with the lettering, we can do it as a line item. It won't be that.
I drive by that thing every day and look at that sign and think that's one of the coolest things in town, so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really honestly having a problem understanding the different ad alternates, convincing myself that certain ones are unwarranted. That's
I'll be
just me.
honest, when these were put together, the best of intentions to try to give you options to reduce the cost, and then kicking ourselves later thinking, well, they're going to happen at some point.
Right.
So that's kind of the staff's take.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think they're probably all needed.
Any other question or discussion on any of those ad alternates?
Well, so are both of you saying maybe the only one you'd be in favor of holding off on is the lettering until we have a better idea of the actual?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely all for funding the signage. And we could add it to this project if we come up with a number that works, but it sounds to me like you'd rather just put it as part of your regular budget later or something later.
Yeah.
So just knowing that you have support at least from whoever says they support it down the road, yeah.
Okay. Okay, at this point in time, we'd like to hear from any citizens that are here, contractors are here, anybody that would like to speak out on either phase 1 or phase 2 of the projects as have been presented today. So, are there any? Sir, please come forward and state your name and address for our record, please.
I'm Ron Cheney Construction from Manhattan, Kansas. I would say I guess I'll just start off with experience with the city. We did Bicentennial Center, second floor remodel. There was 3 bidders on the project. I was low bid. I was the only one that did not modify my bid form. Everybody else modified the bid form. They wanted twice as much time to do the project. We did the project on time. We also did Heritage Hall, which is real extensive, working over finished product that we had to protect and had to do a lot of work in a short period of time. And we were very successful with that. And then Jeff Gillen stated we pulled off a miracle. I'm not sure which project he was referring to, if not both of them, because both of them were tight times. So we did very well on those projects for the city. We did a smaller project across the street from the library, or from the fire station number 1 is the library. That one went very well. The community theater could have gone better. However, we negotiated that thing down, and I'm sure as I'm standing here, it would have never gone had I not put my experience and stuff into play to help them negotiate it down, to get it in budget, because we were just dollars away from it not flying. And I come up with some ideas, creative ideas that allowed the project to go. Where I did goof is the sequence of construction, the type of construction it was, and I and others didn't realize how it had to go, and it took longer than it should have taken based on our original thoughts, because only half of the front could be done before we put our floor in, because we couldn't get a crane in to do that. We had to get a crane in to do that first and come back up and do something else. It was back and forth. We lost a lot of time trying to make all that work. So I guess that's my explanation on that part of the stuff. As far as my bidding procedure, probably 75-80% or maybe higher is the way we do projects. As far as doing a fax modification, usually is the way we do it. This time the documents allowed us to do a modification, so we send in a bid form like as we always do, and we modify it per a letter, as we always do when we do a situation like that. That's what we did. The only difference this time was we had a runner, because we didn't know where to fax it to, so we put a runner down here, but there was so much information that had to be put down, we still felt that fax modification was the safest way for us to do that. So we had a runner, and just will address the subcontract deal too. There's nothing secret about it. We listed Precision Electric as our electrical. I got a phone call later, and by one of the guys said, "Why didn't you list me?" I said, "I did," meaning Actor Electric. I said, "I did." I called my guy that ran the bid. I said, "Who'd you write down?" He said, "Precision." So how in the world did you get Precision? I said, "I don't know. They walked by my truck just as I was writing down the bid form." It's the person's mind. I don't know. He couldn't explain it. He felt really bad about it. But that's how that came about. I called Precision and spoke with Precision about it. Said, "Hey, this is what happened." Talked to Eckerd Electric. I said, "This is what happened." We discussed it. Both of them are cool with whichever way the project goes. Precision's fine with me giving it to Eckerd Electric. I was forthcoming on that. You know, it's one of those things you sit back and think, okay, do I wait? Do I tell the owner later? Want to get awarded the project, or do I do it up front? I just as soon deal with it up front. So I called Donnie and said, this is what happened. And both Eckerd Electric and Precision Electric were very willing, and still are, willing to sit down and verify just exactly what I'm telling you. We've been around for 54 years. I am the owner of the company, sole owner of the company. I will be seeing this project through. So you can't get any closer than that with how it's going to go. I will be down here taking care of it from a project management standpoint. I'll probably stick my nose into a little bit further. My superintendent would probably want me to. But that's the way I operate. And, in Manhattan, we've got a bond issue going on over there with schools. It's wrapping up right now. There's 8 or 9 projects, 6 contractors, and they like us. They thought so far we're just about done, and they're happy with the job we're doing. And they've told me that many times on progress meetings when we go to wrap them up at the end of the meeting, that they're pleased with the work we're doing. So that's my spiel. That's just the way it is. And welcome any questions you have.
Questions, Mr. Cheney?
As to the not showing up to the job site, looking in that they didn't show a log, did you guys, they were said that you did respond that you had come in? Or?
I did come back. I was very, very busy. I had other projects I was bidding on, so I walked in and walked through and saw what I thought I needed to see and walked out. I'm very familiar with that type of construction. I've been doing this for 30-some years, estimating for 30-some years. It's my passion. If I miss something, it's on me anyway.
Can you make the bricks look like the other bricks on the front? There's nothing I can't stand worse than a remodel job where there's 2 tones of brick up there and you can see where the split is. That's the most important question.
I have a little project over in Abilene that told me I was about my yard to get some brick to match the building, discolored and all.
Yeah, there you go.
I didn't feel like dealing with chiggers and stuff, so I didn't do it. But there's a chance we might have some around.
It's going to give you some grief.
So, anyway, that's...
Do you know about how many years ago the Salina Airport Authority project was when you worked with?
About 8 years ago, and that project didn't go well. I had a superintendent on the job. My competition hired him away. At the same time, they were courting my project manager and another superintendent I had, which they ultimately ended up leaving me also. I hired a superintendent to replace the one they hired away. He didn't pan out. So I had to I had to put another guy in that position that wasn't as good as he should have been. Also, the project, we got into the structural part of it. The architect out of Colorado wasn't licensed to do engineering in the state of Kansas. I had to go out, or I did. I'm not going to say I had to. I should have made a bigger issue than it was. But I did go out, and got another engineer to do the job. I paid the cost, not only of the engineering, I paid the cost of the structural modifications that were brought up the concern of the engineering in the first place. I lost money on the job, but I got the job done. And I warranted the job. So, yeah, it didn't go well. But we wouldn't have been in business for 54 years if we didn't have a bad project once in a while, or if all projects went that way.
Right.
I wouldn't be around. So.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have anybody else that would like to comment on the project?
Yes. In Ron's defense, on the Salina Airport Authority project, my involvement, I was hired by the Airport Authority to come in and try to pick up a bad project and try to fix some things that were wrong. So it had gone south way before I got involved with it. I did call a number of architects that I know that are friends of mine around the state that I know that have worked with Mr. Cheney. They said in the past 10 years his work has been very good, and they've been very happy with the work that he has done. So putting in light of my report that I gave you, probably didn't get all the detail that you need. The things that I stated were true, but the circumstances around those, you basically needed some additional information. Relying on the sources that I checked, they were very comfortable with him and would be comfortable with him working on a project such as this one. So I felt it was important that you know that.
Thank you.
I think, Commissioner Angel, you'd added up, if we basically went with all the alternatives, what was kind of the difference there? Was roughly 100,000 or a little more?
I was looking at what the
Oh.
staff recommendations were. It sounds like now there may be some consensus on doing all the add-ons except number 8, so we'll need Mr. Schrage or Mr. Gage. We need a total, yeah.
I bet Mike's already worked it, but I have one.
I thought it was working, so I didn't.
Okay.
Well, you can just look
On my own here.
Just take, yeah, just take,
I can give you both numbers.
I think just subtracting out the signage and
Yeah.
moving forward with Cheney, is that what everyone's comfortable with?
Yeah, the total I had with Cheney, if you subtract just the number 8, is $1,662,406. I'll go ahead and give you the Bauer number. The same equivalent number would be $1,710,000.
1,662,406 and 1,700,000.
about $48,000 difference then
Yes.
in there. There's your sign. $48,000 sign.
Careful,
And
careful.
part of my welcome to Salina sign. That's right.
Careful. No. I like the $700 letters.
You like that one better? Yeah.
Commissioners, if you go, whichever way you go, it might be best to go ahead and keep the award of bid to the contractor as its own action item as recommended, and I'll bring you back in on the question of the construction contingency, the relocation, and that stuff.
Sure.
It's a separate action, so we'll add an action in here.
Yep, yep.
But I think that'll be simpler.
Okay. Understand that.
And I was going to say, I would think the 300 over 360 days, as I know that's just kind of our days to complete, 60 additional days 2 months earlier would seem important to me, but.
So, unless there's further discussion or questions, I think we're in an appropriate time for a motion on item 1, the first phase of the project, to include whatever add alternate and contractor selection. Person making the motion would prefer.
Mayor, I would first move that the commission determine that any irregularities or informalities that may exist in relation to the Cheney bid are inconsequential, do not merit a rejection of the Cheney construction bid, and waive those irregularities and informalities.
Second.
So we have a motion to view the irregularities that were presented during the bid phase as part of the Cheney bid package as inconsequential. The motion's been seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? That motion carries 5-0.
Mayor, I would then move that the commission approve add alternates 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9, and those associated costs.
I'm sorry.
Maybe as well as a base amount for a total of.
Did you want it?
Sure, I think
Do it all
that'd be fine.
together?
Okay.
Those associated costs, and award the base construction bid to Cheney in the amount of $1,662,406.
Second?
Motion and a second to award the project to Cheney Construction to include add alternates number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 9 in the amount of $1,662,406. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Now we will be at a point in time, yes, turn it back over to Jason to discuss the construction contingency.
If you're comfortable with the project contingency and the relocation contingency and furnishings, then I'll state maybe what would be a motion for you, and then someone could say, so moved. Keep it simple for you. The motion would be to authorize a budget project contingency in the amount of $42,000 and a budget relocation contingency in the amount not to exceed $50,000. I put not to exceed on the first one as well. And an allowance not to exceed $81,800 for furnishings. And that means if on any of those that we feel like there's a possibility of exceeding those, we would need to come back and get authorization from the City Commission. Our hope would be not to utilize those, at least the contingencies for the project and the relocation, any more than we have to.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to include construction contingency for $42,000, furnishings and equipment not to exceed $81,800, relocation expenses not to exceed $50,000, totaling $173,800. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Here on what's listed as your second action item on your blue sheet, just have one quick amendment to that. And if you're inclined to approve the first choice, just add the phrase "of the CIP" at the very end of the sentence, because that was the intended phrases in your 2014 of the CIP or Capital Improvement Plan.
I will let someone who's going to be here in 2013 make that motion.
Won't you be mayor in 2013?
Which one I need to, I left my clue sheet in there during the.
It'd be this item 1,
Adding of the CIP. So, I move we approve the inclusion of the architectural design for Phase 2 of the project in the amount of $150,000 in the year 2013, and Phase 2 construction in the amount of $1,350,000 in 2014 of the CIP.
Second.
A motion and a second on action item number 2 to approve the inclusion of the architectural design for Phase 2 of the project in the amount of $150,000 in the year 2013, and Phase 2 construction in the amount of $1,350,000 in the year 2014 of the CIP. All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries 5-0.
Mayor and Commissioners, I'd just like to wrap up and say thank you for your deliberation, your concern and foresight for the community, and I cannot thank you enough on behalf of the fire service and all the people who work in this community to make it better.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
I move to recess into executive session for 15 minutes to discuss confidential data related to the financial affairs and trade secrets of a corporation for the reason that public discussion of the information would competitively disadvantage the corporation, and reconvene at 7:10 p.m.
Second.
Is it a 10-minute or 15?
It was 15 minutes.
Oh, sorry,
That's
okay.
fine, yeah.
All those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? We are now back in executive session. Do we expect action out of this?
We do not.
Okay, thank you.